as well on a naval platform, you should always know your job first. So if you were going to war, I would hope that someone knows the fundamentals and backgrounds of an IW program that's ran successfully so that they could do their job to protect the ship from getting damaged, right? Like, because IW is supposed to be, I mean, it's to the left and to the right of being hit, but prevent you from being hit. And therefore I would want someone to be kind of qualified in their job and qualified IW. But yeah,
I guess when you're saying qualified IW, I'm thinking of something separate from being qualified in your job. Because like
it is.
So like you're working on a watch station in parallel with working on your ESWAS pin, and then you work on your IW pin kind of thing, like where you will add value in the IW function, but you're going to, I would assume, and again, I'm like, don't have a lot of experience with Intel stuff, but that like to qualify the most junior level watch, that it's realistic that you'll stand to add value to that function in the same amount of time that it will take you to qualify ESWAS. Like, are you going to qualify anything beyond the most basic watch station while you're working on that in that amount of time? Or, you know what I mean? Like, you're going to add some value by qualifying that first watch while you're working on your ESWAS pin, and then you would progress to IW along with also qualifying more senior Intel watches. I think that's accurate in my mind, but I obviously don't know with the Intel stuff. But
Grace wanted to add that was the reason for the changes. Priorities were reversed and IW was pushed as more important than mission quals.
Yeah, and that's not surprising to me. Again, it might seem counterintuitive in real life at that command, because I mean, ESWAS might be treated like a thing that's a check in the box. So you're thinking to yourself, like, what am I getting from this? Like, what value does it add for me to have a pin on my chest when I didn't learn anything? Right. And that's a completely valid argument. But if the program was getting implemented the way I think it should be, I would say that prioritization makes complete sense. I don't know if it is. My suspicion is it probably isn't. So then it's kind of like, well, who cares? Just qualify your watch. But it's like, in my mind, if we could get it to a place where that ESWAS program is adding a lot of value to being able to fight the ship in the analysis of all the officers and chiefs and whoever is on board, I think that the prioritization makes sense.
Cool. The next question, let me see here. It's from one of our newer ensigns. He says, if a division has a manning issue, such as specific sailors are deemed irreplaceable to the division, is that Big Navy's fault for not giving you the personnel you need, or is it the command's fault for not training in a big enough bench to cover down for other sailors while they're absent? Maybe a mix of both? Thank you.
Yeah, I would say maybe a mix of both. It's situational. I would say if you're in a place where somebody is irreplaceable, it could be because they're literally irreplaceable. Like, I don't have enough bodies to fill all the spots. And so they're not irreplaceable because they're the only one that knows how to do a thing, because we did a bad job of training everyone else and qualifying everyone else. It's because we literally don't have anyone else. So that's a big Navy manning issue. It seems like everybody has problems with manning. So, it wouldn't shock me if that plays a role almost everywhere. But the majority of the time, I would think that it's, if you're in that place and manning isn't, like, you're not crippled by not enough manning, then we're not doing a good enough job training and qualifying, because no one's irreplaceable. Is it nice to have some just like top shelf pipe hitting watch stander that's incredible at what they do? Yeah, no, it is. It's awesome. But when we lose that person, does that mean we can't fight the ship anymore? It shouldn't. So if we're doing an appropriate job of training and qualifying our people, you'd be surprised at how quickly someone with less experience takes that spot, and all of a sudden they're that person. So, and again, maybe not as good. Maybe their ceiling isn't in the same place, but they're still doing a great job, and that's okay. Like, it's a human organization. You're never going to have just top shelf, like 10 out of 10 people in every spot all the time. It's impossible. But are we training and qualifying them and progressing them to their ceiling? And then is the warfighting team progressing to their ceiling as well? Because that's something that we don't often talk about. I think where like, so it wasn't just, I didn't just have a helmsman and a plainsman driving the ship, right? Which for those of you that don't know, it's like we got, you know, stern planes or fairwater planes and good God, I'm old and I can't remember the names of things. Fairwater planes and bow planes, and then stern planes and the rudder, right? So it's the first one or either or. Anyway, makes you go up, down, left, right, and puts an angle on the ship to help put it where you want it to be. But so they're driving the submarine, right? That they're not the only part of that ship's control team, right? So I have a chief of the watch on the left that's pumping ballast around the submarine and operating like alarms and the OMC and all this other stuff. And then as the dive, I'm supervising the helmsman and plainsman and chief of the watch and kind of telling him what I need to do to effectively fly the submarine underwater. So are we doing a good job of communicating? And then I have an officer of the deck behind me giving me orders and all kinds of this. So are we doing a good job of communicating? Are we working well together as a team? Am I giving them the things that they need to succeed? Are they willing to tell me like, hey, dive, I think we're heavy forward. I need you to put some water aft so I can drive this thing better. So there's that as well. The more we work on proficiency, training, qualifications, and all that stuff, and the more time we spend actually working well together as a team, I think the better we are. For all the eye rolls this will probably get if I have submariners in the audience, is like they're the good commands that you see doing a lot of like this type of stuff specifically well is the type that stress like formal comms and watch team backup and actually mean it. Like, because some people say those things as buzzwords, but on one of my submarines, we called it peer-to-peer enforcement. It was basically watch team backup. And it was like, we created this culture where you had the ability to walk up to a senior chief and tell them their uniform was jacked up. And it was like, it became this thing. And I know that sounds stupid, but it became this thing like, got me, you know, like, all right. And then like you fix it. But we made it okay to do that. And by making it okay for a junior watchstander to correct a senior watchstander, or for an officer to correct like a second class or whatever on those types of things, and provide the backup required during those things. Because there's a lot of times I was sitting in control stand and watch, and I got a big mouth if it's not obvious. And when somebody said something stupid, I was always just like, no, we're not doing, that's not right. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? And then like push back a lot. But I've watched a lot of watchstanders not do that. And I'm like, hey, are you sure you want to do that? Like, you sure you don't want to do this? You sure you don't want to provide some okay. And then you find or we'll be in the trainer. That's even better, where you're kind of setting people up to fail to see if they catch it and take the right actions and deal with the problem appropriately. And you're sitting there watching it happen, and you're like, oh, what are you doing? You know, like say this, and or do this or whatever. And they're like taking the inappropriate actions to deal with like a jam dive, which is when the planes get jammed in dive and the submarine starts going down really, really fast, and we can't control it because the planes are jammed. You know what I mean? So that's a very bad thing if you don't want to go beneath crush depth. So you have to do things. There's immediate actions and all this crap you have to do to combat the casualty and recover the ship, like get control of it so that you're not going down anymore. And so you'll watch people just like doing the wrong, and like people panic. They don't communicate well. They don't do the things required to combat the casualty. And then when you're done, you're like, okay, so do we think formal communication is important yet? You know? So the people that do those types of things right, are generally in a way better place because they're progressing all those watchstanders to their ceiling. And then that ceiling, like you add all those things together and you have a strong watch team, because like, I'll know if I have a weak plainsman, but so will everyone else in my watch section, and they'll be watching that plainsman to see when they need backup, and they'll be going out of their way to like kind of nudge them or give them suggestions as we go, or ask them what they need or whatever. Because even the two plane surfaces, like, so one guy generally has the rudder and the stern planes, and the other guy's got the fairwater planes, and two different sets of sticks. And so they're working together. Like you're putting lift on the submarine or putting dive on the submarine. And when you put the angle on, or when you're adjusting the rudder, that affects how the other planes behave. And then that affects how the submarine behaves. So does all the water we're pumping in and out, right? It makes it either negatively or positively buoyant. So that's going to then speed, and it all plays into it, and it all affects how the submarine behaves. So if I need something, I need to say that. And so those planesmen talking to each other, they affect each other based on what they're doing. So them talking to each other, them then talking to me and me talking to them. Hey, what do you need? Oh, it feels heavy. Dive. Can we pump some water off? And then I analyze and see, and okay, yep, tell the chief of the watch to do that. Sometimes the chief of the watch, who controls those pumps and those ballast tanks, will anticipate my needs because I've got a finite amount of bandwidth too. And he'll either start doing something because he knows, or he'll say, Dive, recommend pumping variable ballast to sea. And it's just like, gives me it flips a switch in my head, like, oh crap, yeah, no, I am heavy. I need to do that. And like, then they'll do it. And I might have waited another few minutes to do that, combating this problem that I couldn't figure out. And oh crap, we were heavy the whole time. Well, if the chief of the watch sees that and knows, they can then tell me that. And hopefully that wasn't all too submarine specific.
It was a little.
Sorry.
I want to add, like, can I add my 2 cents? Is that
yeah, absolutely, do it.
So before I got out, I'm a veteran now. I was an E6, and I entered into my command in this mission, and I fell in love with the mission. I ended up becoming in charge of the mission, and I was an E6 there, running the mission, and kind of single-handedly, I was like one of two in the day shop, if you will. Mm-hmm. The other guy just kind of put together the weekly brief, and that took him like the whole week to do, even though it was like 2 slides. And then I was doing like 100 other things. And then we got a new chief. We didn't have one for a while. It was kind of weird. And then the chief is like, okay, you're clearly running everything. Who's your replacement? And I was like, yeah, I mean, I would love one, but I haven't identified one. No one has been available. Like, no one had interest to take over the position. So, I mean, there's that perspective too. Like, some people, in a sense, right, like, could be irreplaceable, but, you know, you can force someone to train up to do it. Like, I did the best I could to make, like, guides and...
right. Which that's super valuable. Like continuity books, like, yeah, where you're, like, creating guides to do the things so that when you're gone, at least they have a roadmap.
I did that at as much as I could.
I would say
I'll do it, but, you know.
Yeah. I would say, like, it happens, but it happens because we don't recognize, because a guy that, and I'm going to make some assumptions about you based on what you just told me, is like a guy like you, who's probably like kind of a top 1% performer, where you were taking on the lion's share of the work because you were capable of it. And because, like, it's easy for all those people to just let you do it. It's easy for us to say, oh, well, we're good because he can do it. Like, and let that happen. But anticipating the need of, hey, he's going to leave eventually, and we don't have another guy that can handle the workload that he's handling, even though it might not have been appropriate for you to let work in the first place, and they probably should have fixed that, but that's another story for another time. We're in this place that we're in, right? So why didn't we, like, moneyball that stuff out to everyone else, where it's like, yeah, we don't have one person that can do your 10 jobs, but we've got 10 people that can do one of those jobs. And then making that happen so that when you disappear, it's like, we have one person trained to do one of those things across all 10 of those tasks, and we have the guides that he left behind. You should be in a pretty good place where the wheels aren't going to fall off the wagon. Is it going to get done as well, as fast? You know, like, maybe, probably not, but, like, the wheels aren't going to fall off the wagon. Like, the thing's not going to stop working, and then we can work on increasing the quality and proficiency and everything else. But yeah, a lot of times with someone like you that is, like, got 90% of the workload on your back, which should have never happened to begin with, but part of that was them doing a bad job of recognizing it, and part of it was probably just your ability. Kind of, it's the easy button. Like, I'm guilty of it. I had an LPO on my last submarine where, I mean, I was standing 8 hours to dive and control every day. And then I had a bunch of crap that happened afterwards. And then I was a drill guy. And then I was the simio. And then I was assistant ship's diving officer, which is just another stupid clerical duty where I was writing and grading exams all the time. I was doing everything but my job for about 12 hours a day. And then my division would get my attention for maybe an hour. And it's like, so my LPO was effectively doing my primary duty, which is unfair to him. And he was standing watch. And this kid was superhuman. And, I didn't want it to be that way, but it was just like, that's kind of like how submarines go. It's like, I'm a senior chief on a submarine at the time, and it's, you get burned with all this crap, and part of it was because I could do it and my cob saw I could do it. And I never, like, he would just task me and I'd push back and be like, hey, I kind of got a division to run. But that part of it was that and I know this is probably relevant in other communities, but on submarines, I think it's even worse, is that like my job's not real on a submarine. Like no one cares. If the meal's out and hot and it's not like the bread's not moldy, like they're not going to care about any of the things I have going on or what I need to do. So I was often branded as like defensive and like just loud and obnoxious, because you have to be to defend your people and not have them get put into a bad spot all the time because they don't think our job's real until it's lunchtime. So it's weird in that, like, I was put in that same spot, and it was then by virtue of that, I had to put my LPO in that same spot. And so it's like, even I had a hard time figuring that out. And we got it to a place where people started taking things off his plate as we got people trained up. But it was tough because he also had to do the training a lot of the times. Like I was trying to get free. Like I got off the watch bill for like a week at a time, twice during the entire time I was there, just fighting to get that time to go train other members of my division to take stuff off his plate so that he wasn't doing everything. So I think it happens out of necessity sometimes because you have people that have the aptitude to do it and the thing needs to get done. So they just go do it. But then you find yourself in that hazardous space of when that person goes away, and they will eventually, whether it's PCS or separating. And then it's like, oh shit, now what do we do? You know, and it's like, that's something that needs to be forecasted out. You need to plan for it, and you need to understand that you might not have another Superman sitting on the bench. So you have to farm that stuff out and divide it up in a way that we can like moneyball our way to at least everything not being on fire.
It's so funny you say moneyball because I had come up with a command project and they wanted to call it that.
Nah, I like it. It's great, baby.
The next question comes from somebody who is literally on an airplane right now who helped put this together. Donna, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. He's not sure if this is going to work, but
he said he was going to get the airplane Wi-Fi, so we'll see.
I'll read your question, Dinah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You. And it was like completely clear, and then we lost you. Propagation, am I right? Signal propagation. He says, Master Chief, what are some leadership experiences and tips you can give to an E5 in terms of leading fellow junior sailors and ways you can actually have an impact on those you lead while at a junior level yourself? Follow-up question, what is your opinion on mandatory warfare devices? You kind of touched on this. Is there a point where they should become mandatory? Should they become completely voluntary? Keep in mind, this is from an IW. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Diana, that's coming from an IW perspective. Right. The level of impact that they should have on selection boards of any flavor, promotions, special programs, etc. Thank you.
I'll just do the warfare piece first. I think they 100% should be mandatory and should happen in very much the same way they do on submarines. But I also think there's probably some that you could make exceptions for, maybe. And I don't know that I'm qualified to make that evaluation, as far as like some of them seem like they get specific enough that I don't know that they need to be mandatory. And IW kind of strikes me as one of them, but I don't know, like I don't know enough about it to say either way. There's some other like this, some other ones kind of like that, I would think, but I don't know. I could be completely wrong about that, and it would fall into I think it should be completely mandatory for all the reasons I talked about earlier. Like I think if they're implemented correctly, which I would guess a lot of them aren't, just based on conversations I've had with people in a lot of those communities. But I think if they were implemented in a way that they were focused on developing warfighters on whatever platform or in whatever community we're talking about, in the way that I think they should, and that they have been demonstrated like to successfully be able to do in like submarines and special warfare and stuff like that, where those programs are done in a way that add a lot of value to that community and their warfighting ability. So I would think that it would apply everywhere if done correctly. So if done correctly, yes, I 100% think they should be mandatory. I might need you to repeat the first part.
Okay. 1 sec. I lost it. What are some leadership experiences and tips you can give to
for E5s and juniors? Yeah. Got it. Okay. So when a lot of times, one of the and that's honestly one of the reasons I started this podcast was I was an A school instructor at the time. It's been about 7 years. I had a lot of junior sailors just getting out to the fleet, and they were reaching back, asking like two flavors generally of questions. And one of them was like kind of focused on not knowing how to deal with certain types of leaders, like especially like the E5s, E6s of the world, because a lot of these sailors are on carriers and stuff. So their first line leader that they're dealing with the most frequently is generally like a second class or a first class. And then on the flip side of that, it was they were thrust into some kind of supervisory role as a young third class. And oh God, what do I do with my hands? So the biggest stuff that I could tell you in dealing with leadership responsibilities or in trying to put yourself in a role like that is if it's a literal role, like where you're a work center supervisor or maybe like an ALPO or something. Even an LPO, like I had a second class LPO on a submarine because we were small. So smaller shops might have a second class LPO, but is kind of some of the stuff I talked about earlier when we were talking about chiefs being humanized. Is like be relatable, ask questions, ask for feedback, like open yourself up to that kind of stuff with the understanding that at the end of the day, you're going to make a decision and we're going to go with that. And I'm going to explain to you why we're doing that. And you can agree or disagree, but that's still what we're doing. But also being open to the fact that when I present a plan and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing, that's the time to inject your input. And so being open to that kind of stuff as well is like, I've never found a better filter than like a group of E4s and E5s to punch holes in my great idea, you know. And I did a lot of that even at the command level when I was filling in for the COB. We'd come up with some kind of policy and I would walk out of the chief's mess and walk into the area where all the E5s and E4 cruise mess or whatever and say, and there was always a couple of real vocal guys that were very willing to tell me when they thought something was stupid. Put it in front of them, tell them to start poking holes in it. And a lot of it was really good stuff. And it's like, I've been a chief longer than I was ever a blue shirt. So it's like, do I remember what it was like? Yeah, I think so, but like maybe not. I don't know. So I want that perspective and input so that because when you do that, like when you find yourself in these roles, especially when you're a lower level leader, it's going to have to feel more like a team effort. You're not going to have as much legitimate authority or ability to just say, do it and think that group of people's actually going to just do it. Because it's like, again, like a chief walks in the room, says, hey, go do this thing. That group of people, because of the legitimate authority, the rank, and the power they have to make your life hurt, you're going to be more apt to go do it. Even if it's just compliance for the sake of like self-preservation, you're going to go do it. Where if a second class walks in, it's like, well, how much harm can this guy do to me? You know, like, let's be honest. So it's got to feel a lot more like a team effort that you're kind of managing. And it's got to feel like everybody's got input in a lot of ways. So having conversations with them, involving them in the decision-making process, and which again, like I always think there's value in that, because then those people feel like they own a piece of that process. Like this wasn't, the LPO's idea. This was our idea. Like we decided what our fate was going to be, and that was something that I leveraged a lot as a chief on a submarine. Was look, like I'm not going to be the one in there standing this watch. So if I'm going to tell you this is how we're going to do it, I want to know that it's not a stupid idea. Like I want to know that I'm not unnecessarily making your life hard. So I would sit down, I'd come up with those ideas because I also have a ton of experience and I'd like to think I'm a pretty smart dude. So I'd say like, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing. Like, here's the rough sketch of the plan. What do you guys think? And they would start poking holes in it or not. They'd say it was a great idea. And why didn't we think of that? So it'd go either way. Sometimes we got to a place where they would come to me with ideas and say, hey, chief, can we try this? And I'm like, okay, did you think of this? You think of that? And they're like, yeah, no, we did. And we think it'll work. I'm like, all right, let's do it. Like, as long as we're not breaking any rules, it's not unsafe. Like I'm still accomplishing all the things that I need to by policy. Like, yeah, why not? If you guys think it'll be easier, let's do it. And there were times where they would do things that I thought if I was the guy in there standing galley watch captain, I would hate that. Like that would make my life miserable. And I told them that. But this is how we like to do it. I'm like, okay, whatever. I think it's harder than it needs to be, but if that's how you like to do it, I just want you in there happy getting after it. So like, go ahead, do it that way. I don't care. As long as it's getting done and the product is acceptable and we're not breaking any rules and everything's like cool, whatever. So that's kind of the approach I take when you're in that junior level spot. It becomes harder because you don't have legitimate authority. But honestly, most leaders shouldn't be leaning on legitimate authority anyway. Like that should be like your last resort.
So walking that question back a little even further, we got a question here from Astral, who just put on E4 because it's automatic for his rate. So not a lot of respect there. But he asked the question, what do you feel is the best things that junior sailors can do to thrive or survive in an environment of bad leadership? And what do you think that they, as a junior sailor, can do to change the climate? So even further back than that, right? Like much more junior.
Yeah. So for you to survive and thrive in a area of bad leadership is kind of control what you can control. And so that's going to kind of answer your second question too, is for you to impact the climate, all you can do is control what you can control, right? So everybody's got a sphere of influence, and that sphere of influence grows as you get promoted by position and rank, right? So whatever you can do for the group of sailors that you have in your sphere of influence to make their life not just not just mitigate the negative effects of that bad leadership, but also like maybe even shield them from it to a certain extent, and just make decisions and do things in a way that make their life good, like make it easy to do their job, make sure they have all the things they need, make sure they're taken care of, they have whatever time they need to go do the things that they need to do, they're getting qualified, etc. Right? You're not going to be able to fix the command, right? And I can tell you this from experience, even at the higher levels. Like was I able to make an impact? Like, did I make a dent? Yeah, maybe. I think there were some positive conversations that happened. I think that my input was valued. I think that I definitely like made a slight mark on like the process of going forward and doing things a little bit better. But I definitely made my money controlling what I can control. And when I'm a department chief on a submarine that fills in for the COB, my sphere of influence is pretty large. To the point that I even had people, and I still to this day have people coming to me that never actually worked for me, but they were somebody that I'd walk around the submarine and just talk to sailors and just say like, hey, how's it going? And like kind of presented myself in a way that I was approachable. They started to trust me. They knew they could talk to me, and they knew they could bring me problems. And I had either the COB's ear or I was acting as, and so then I could make decisions. And so I had a lot of influence, where at the lower levels, you're not going to have so much influence, but you're going to have a sphere of influence that you can control and just do the best you can in that way. And then something I probably should have said this earlier. There was another question in this vein, but like junior sailors in leadership positions need to look up too. And so when we're looking up at and saying that this leadership sucks, right? Does it suck, or is it figuring it out as they go along? Are they people that are terrible human beings with bad character, or are they the type of people that got put in a position without being fully prepared and they're learning on the job, right? Because one of the foundational concepts of this whole podcast thing is that throughout our entire careers, we're never provided leadership development and education formally until you get to the Senior Enlisted Academy. And they're trying to do it with the NLEC ELD stuff now. And I've heard pretty good things about it. So I hope that takes off and does really great things. But the leaders that are in these positions were never taught how to do it. They were brought up in a certain way, and their behavior was validated through promotions and awards, whether it was good or bad. And now we find ourselves with them as our LPO or chief or whatever, right? And they may not be, and I can tell you from my side of things, generally are not bad people. They're regular people trying to figure it out, right? And generally they have your best interests at heart, but they don't always know the right way of going about taking care of that thing, or even conveying to you that they in fact have your best interests at heart. I know a lot of like air quotes bad chiefs that I've sat in the mess with that are like burying their face in their hands in tears. Like, why can't they just trust me, or why don't they like me, or why can't I get this thing done, or why does my division not listen, or whatever. like tore up about the fact that they screwed a thing up or that they can't figure out how to do this thing right. And so we then spent a bunch of time talking about it, but they've never been taught. Like they just haven't. And it sucks that that's real. And so that's kind of another thing that you can do is spend time like learning. But I'm going to cough again. Hang on. Good Lord. But supporting your leadership. So like, even when it's nauseating, like even when like you're really swallowing your pride in a certain kind of way, like if there's something that needs to get done to support mission accomplishment and that's best for your shop, just do it. If your leadership needs something done that you recognize it, but I've seen divisions let leaders fall on their face, right? Because they don't like them, like an LPO or a chief or a divo. And that is the like absolute wrong answer unless you can like objectively prove to me that they're the devil, you know, like that they're one of those leaders that most people think they have and generally don't. Like they exist, but they're rare. So it's like actually get behind them and push, because one of the first things I say when somebody brings me a specific case of, hey, my leadership sucks, this is what they did, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, what are you doing about it? Like, what are you doing to help? Because like it could be a if we're not talking about like a very specific case of I was done wrong by my leadership, because a lot of those are brought and they're objectively bad. It doesn't mean that leader's a devil. It means they screwed up generally. And we'll talk about the specific case, but I'm talking about like when somebody's like, oh, that command climate here sucks. Leadership's toxic, blah, blah, blah. And like, I hate coming to work. And it's more talking about like the broader concept of command climate and just the way things are done and leadership's stupid and we hate them. It's like, okay, what are you doing about it? Well, what do you mean? What am I doing about it? Well, you have control over your input. Like you have control. And a lot of times you have influence over other people's input and attitude and whatever. Right. So if a shop full of people that think they have a terrible leader were to get together and conspire to help that person, what could change? Like, what's the potential outcome there? Well, that leader's a lot less stressed out. They hate their life a lot less. And so maybe they start behaving in a way that's a lot more positive, right? But when they think everybody's out to get them all the time, including their own division, you have an adversarial relationship with your leadership. Should you be the one that's fixing this problem? No, you shouldn't. Your leader should do a better job. I agree with you. But also kind of detach, zoom out a little bit. That leader used to be where you are. Where you are now, are you provided leadership development and education? If you're promoted one time right now, would you be provided leadership development and education? Would you be prepared and qualified to do the next level job? Because I can tell you the day I made chief at 9.5 years, I had no idea what I was doing. I figured it out, and thank God I was at the command I was at, because it was like chief university, but like really, really great people there. But not everybody's that lucky. And unless you luck box your way into a great mentor, when are you provided leadership development and education? Like, okay, go read a John Maxwell book. Like that'll help. But when are you provided this? Like, when are these leaders that we all want to burn in effigy provided the leadership development and education to qualify and prepare them to do the job that they're doing? Never. Until they're at the Senior Enlisted Academy, which generally you have to be an E8 to attend. And it's amazing. I went. I loved every second of it. It was really, really great. And the whole time I was wondering to myself, why in the hell is this not done at every level? And again, the ELD inlet courses are attempting that, and I hope it succeeds wildly. But that doesn't fix where we're at right now. And so when you're looking at those types of situations, I would encourage you to give that human being the benefit of the doubt. Could they be a bad person? Absolutely. But it's pretty rare that you got a sociopath as a chief. It's generally someone that is immature in their leadership development, and that doesn't mean they're a brand new chief. That just means they haven't been developed. This could be a senior chief, as disgusting as that is to say out loud. So what do they need to be better? Like, what do they need to do a better job? Like, they probably need help, the support of their division. Like, so you can add to their abilities by like supporting them, helping them out, doing the things that they need to do. Again, I'm not saying you got to like put them up on your shoulders and carry them out of the shop cheering. Like that, a lot of this is on them to be doing. Like, they should be at a place in their life that they've at least matured to the point that they can recognize that they need that leadership development education, but it's often not the case. And it's not the case because we've handicapped them by validating their performance and behavior and ideas with promotions and awards. And then they find themselves in this place. So they don't think they're doing it wrong. It's a weird catch-22, but your ability to influence a shop or even a command, it's like, that's the best suggestion I can give you. Don't ever put it on your own shoulders, like thinking that you're going to be able to fix the command, because I couldn't even fix the command. I think I contributed towards making it better, but I think probably the biggest impact I made was on sailors, like taking care of them while they're in my sphere of influence, which was pretty large at the time. I hope that answers that question. It's a tough spot to be in, because I don't like a lot of really intelligent, high functioning young sailors want to do that. Like they look at this, they identify a problem within their command, and they're like, man, I really wish I could influence that in a positive way. And it's like you can influence it in a positive way, but you're not going to be able to influence it in the significant way that you want to at such a junior level. As much as that sucks, you kind of just have to accept that you have that sphere of influence for now at the current level that you're at. So do the best you possibly can with that. If opportunities present themselves to influence it at a bigger level, like if you all of a sudden get a commanding officer or a CMC that opens up like these forums and is like, I want to hear from everybody, and the CO suggestion box starts turning into policy because they think you have good ideas all of a sudden, yeah, 100% do that. Inject yourself into that process. But if that has ever happened, it's pretty rare. So just, unfortunately, the answer that I give that probably isn't that popular is control what you can control.
I think that was a great answer. The next question comes from Stealth Command.
Apologize, my mic just muted on myself. Representing the smaller departments and outgoing Navy, Master Chief, do you believe that sub-IDCs and just even surface IDCs provide a sufficient level of medical knowledge, or do you believe the Navy should employ physicians and physician assistants on all boats going out?
I only have real life experience with sub IDCs. I think they're incredible. I've never had one that hasn't been able to meet my needs, and hasn't been able to handle like what happens out to sea in a submarine. I mean, I'm sure there could be some like high level debate about whether or not, because there's times where we do medevac sailors because the capacity of that IDC and the facilities, the problem they have, it's beyond the capacity of those things. And could that keep like a submarine or ship or whatever out to sea longer? I mean, yeah, sure. If we had a physician that could take care of a problem that an IDC can't, then yeah, great. But I don't know how much you would gain by going beyond an IDC, because like I said, I mean, I've heard of, there's been some bad ones too, like, but my experience with the probably half a dozen of IDCs that I've had over my career, they were all awesome. Like even the ones I wasn't like personally a big fan of, they knew their job and they could take care of every need I ever had. So yeah, I would like to see a junior corpsman on board with them. That would be great. If the IDCs that get underway had like an HM3 with them, I think there'd be a lot of value added there, for them to have a second set of hands, and for some of the other stuff that happens, they can just, they can go get me a bag of Motrin, you know what I mean? Like, but also like for those of you that don't know, I got to talk to James Parlier. He was a CMC on the Cole when it was bombed, and he was a corpsman, so he kind of talked about some of the triage that happened and like how they like cared for a lot of the people that were injured. And it was just like on a submarine, I think about something like the San Francisco collision happening, and the level of training, most of what they call EMAT, it's an emergency medical assistance team. It's generally mostly the cooks, like my junior cooks. Not a lot of IDCs are out there giving them super robust training. Like it happens. I had one, there's a guy I've had on the podcast. I mean, those guys could stitch, they could run IV bags, they could do a lot of valuable things in that type of a scenario. But on most boats, like I knew how to carry a stretcher and that was about it. So I think there'd be a lot of value added there by adding like an HM3. I think that'd be cool. And I think a lot of young corpsmen would see that, like get to see that IDC world ahead of time and be like, oh yeah, this is what I want to do, or not, But yeah, I guess in my completely unqualified opinion, I don't think we need doctors or PAs on submarines. I think IDCs are outstanding.
All right, the next question is from someone you know, recently put on Senior Chief, also a DJ in his free time. Go ahead.
Somebody I know.
So, well, you guys promoted at the same time.
Okay. Yeah.
And, you guys are all linked to the same brother hive mind, so. Go ahead, Alanis, whenever you're ready. There you go.
Oh, there I am. Yeah, I'm not
Nailed
great
it.
with this. No, we don't. We've just probably been in Bangor. We probably met each other in passing.
Oh, yeah, probably.
All right, yeah. So, hey, my question is, so as you mentioned earlier, you're the CMEO on one of the boats, right?
Mhm.
So I'm currently CMEO at my command, and one things that I know I've been disappointed by is the limits of creating the type of change that sailors are actually demanding through that program within the command, particularly in terms of resistance from upper leadership, understanding their role in things. Where do you feel like that program could be improved, and what methods did you employ to get your upper chain of command to actually meaningfully self-reflect on their own role in that program?
Well, I can tell you what I tried to do. Did I get them to meaningfully reflect? No, not really. And that's the tough part with it for me, is debriefing like a command climate survey where there's clearly trends saying that, the CO does this thing and we hate it, or like the Chiefs mess does this thing and we hate it, and or whatever. We want to see this type of change. I sat in there and it was this kind of, oh, well, that's not true. And then they like laugh it off. And I'm like, okay, it is true. I have multiple comments, and oh, by the way, I work here. Like, it is true. And you guys need to take this stuff seriously. What we ended up doing that I thought had a lot of value was we did, and I'll probably have trouble recalling some of the terms, but like the small focus groups after the fact with the command resiliency team, and then the focus groups that come after that with like different cross sections of crew members. I think the conversations are really valuable. And then we did a submarine cultural workshop after that it seemed like while it was happening, the sailors got a lot of value out of it. But then when it came time for any kind of action by the chain of command, that was where it was like, I was really disappointed by the conversations I had with my triad about it. And I thought a lot of it, especially when it pertained to them or to chiefs, it was kind of laughed off. And I'm just like, that's not what this is. A mirror. Like, you're standing in front of it. You should be able to identify that these things exist. 150 people just told you that this is a problem. I mean, obviously, like, it's not 150 of the same comment, but if there's a trend that we identify that like you're taking bad grades in this area, and or there's a lot of specific handwritten comments, like, you got to take these things seriously. What I'd like to see happen is for like higher level commanders to demand accountability on it, which I think the reports go up, but I've never, unless it's like really, really bad. And by then you generally have EO complaints, not just the climate survey. Unless you have like really, really, really bad surveys come back, generally what you end up seeing is, okay, yeah, check the box, make the spreadsheet green, USS whatever is done with their command climate survey. I'd like to see more attention put on it by higher level commanders, but on the flip side of it, what I've seen happen is there's no hard and fast requirement, at least when I was doing it, for completion of that survey. And it just had like guidelines where the metrics were something like, if you get above like 45 or 50%, it's like, that's a good survey. I would like to see it basically explain to sailors in a way that like, hey, this is your opportunity, like fire away, where it's generally not. And that was one of the mechanisms I employed to get a better survey response and more honest comments, was like, look, this is one of your only chances to provide feedback on how the chain of command is doing their job, how you think the chiefs are doing, like what you think the climate's like, and how you wish it would change and stuff like that. Like, if there was ever a time to say what you mean, now is the time, and it's all anonymous. Well, the problem is not a lot of sailors believe it's anonymous. When the stuff is briefed, they don't see a lot of action taken on it. So they kind of just don't. They kind of think it's like one of those phone surveys you do at the end of a call with like some kind of company. It's like, no, I don't want to do that because you don't really care anyway. So yeah, I guess it would probably need to be like revamped and repackaged in a way that sailors could provide that input, and that they would do it in a, like, we would have to encourage or require participation, which requiring participation is probably not the move, because then you're going to get a lot of people just like clicking one thing throughout the thing and then typing "I don't care" on the box. But yeah, so finding a way to do it where the involvement in it is a little more, I don't know, personal or like discussion based or like involved, and then it done in a way where that feedback is incorporated into something meaningful. Because I think that's probably the biggest problem is like the like you said in your question, is like the feedback is generally not valued, and a lot of it stops at the triad of that command unless they get the world's worst survey or an EO complaint. So some kind of programming in of like, hey, this is, and honestly, like the way you'd probably drive that is if they could do online surveys that drives a CO's like EO grade, and then that actually gets factored into their fit reps, you'd probably see a slightly different attitude taken towards it. Because like you see E1 through E6 evals has like equal opportunity on there, and it's almost never taken seriously as a individual trait when grading. And we'd go down a whole nother rabbit hole about how broken the eval system is. But like, if it was factored into a CO's fit rep, and it may be, but I mean, in a meaningful way, like I'd have to go look at how they do their fit reps. But
I would like give you a quick break and add my 2 cents. I was on the command resiliency team, and we had to put together a presentation for the command about our results. And I was doing this as an E6. We signed it like a non-disclosure agreement and all that. But I had permission to do this, and we had the entire command, so several hundred people in this giant room with this giant screen, and I said, let's talk about this the command survey. A lot of people here don't believe in it. They don't believe it's worth anything, but I want to show you something. Here is some comments that we got on the survey, and I want everyone to appreciate the irony of this. And it's just all on one giant screen. The comment said, "It doesn't matter what I fucking write. Nobody reads these things anyway." And it was in front of the whole command.
I love that. I wish that was a requirement.
Because I think immediately dispelled the myth.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and I'm showing like, and you can see it's anonymous. I don't know who wrote it. There was no date or time. It's just a list of things that look like this. Like, just me, I was not aware of what the process was before I was on the CAT team. And it doesn't have to be a secret. And I think being transparent about that gives it some reality.
Yeah. No, I really like that. I wish that was a requirement in the program, that it has to be briefed to the entire command. And I would even like, it could be like somebody like me, but I would almost like to see the triad do it, because it's like, you have to talk about it. Like, I want you to stand up in front of, like, I could like give the introduction, frame it in a way like where you explained like, no, this is how it's structured. This is how the comments look, blah, blah, blah. But then to have like stand up there and have the command triad like answer the question, like why does the Chiefs mess suck? Stand up there in front of that group of people and answer that question. Because I've seen some really specific comments about like where they give an example of like, this is why I think the Chiefs mess sucks, and they give like this example of how their leave got canceled when they had a flight booked already and it was approved previously or whatever, like. And have to stand up there in front of the crew and justify it. That would be a fun way to get it to be valued by the triad and even the participants, because if they got to stand up there and talk about those things, and it kind of cuts both ways, because like, yeah, that stupid comment card thing that cooks do, right? And I think it's ridiculous, because you almost never get any valuable feedback from it. You get like a lot of good jobs for some of the cooks when they do good things, but you get a lot, at least on submarines, we get a lot of really like ridiculous ones where it's just like empowered by anonymity. They say a bunch of ridiculous crap that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's another thing is in my presentation, I also showed, hey, when you guys are going to leave a comment, when you just write like, this sucks, with like no context, we can't do anything about that.
Right. Right. It adds no value. Like it might have made you feel better for half a second when you typed it, but like, ha ha ha, like I wrote this in the command climate survey, but it's like, it doesn't add any value. Like, why do we suck? Like, why, like be specific. And that's what we say. Like, so we do menu review boards as well. And it's like, okay, like I get it. You don't want to tell me to my face. So write it on a comment card, send me an email. We had like this on submarines. We have like it's a CO suggestion box, but you can do it with like department heads or anyone, department chiefs. You can send them an anonymous thing, which again, a lot of sailors didn't believe that we couldn't go in and like look and see who they were. Which, I mean, the network administrator might be able to, but I can't. And it's like, hey, if you have like feedback that you want to submit, but you don't want me to know it's you, or like, okay, cool, but don't tell me I suck. Tell me why I suck. All right. Because it's not valuable if you don't tell me why, because then I can't fix it. Like, I don't generally know why I suck. Like it could be a million things. So yeah, I think that's amazing. I really like that idea.
Cool. So I think that we had more questions in chat, but I think we're hitting our time limit, and I think you're hitting your voice limit.
Oh, I'm good. I'm like, this is mostly just allergies. I got some crap in my throat that's making me sound hoarse, but I'll be all right for a little bit longer if you want to.
Okay, yeah, we're fine to keep going, I guess. Dinah, you got the next question. You want to try to use your mic again, or?
It feels like every generation of leaders is disconnected from the needs of the junior sailors. What are some things we can do for the future to improve communication between senior decision-making leaders and junior sailors so problems are effectively communicated and solutions? Essentially, why is communication between senior leadership and junior sailors so bad?
Oh, because they don't trust us. That's the main thing for me, is that junior sailors don't trust chiefs. It's not that they don't trust me as a person, right? Like it's shockingly easy to overcome it one-on-one, right? Where my current job, I go down on submarines and do inspections on the supply department, right? So like I'll go down on a new submarine every time. We're there for 2.5 days. These guys generally don't know me, like know of me generally, but they don't know me personally unless they worked for me or maybe I was their A school instructor. So I'll go down there and I'll go in the galley and kind of just like make them nervous. And you get that type of a response. Like you can feel it in the air that they don't want me in there. It takes me about 30 seconds to break the ice and get them telling me all of their dirty secrets, you know, like just coking and joking in the galley, like laughing. As soon as I give them permission to behave that way, and that it's, oh, this master chief's not going to yell at us for joking around and kind of like just talking about these types of things. Oh, okay, cool. So it's, the trust piece is gigantic. And when you're in leadership positions, it's more difficult, right? Because there's obviously certain, they know they're not going to have to deal with me for more than 2.5 days either. So there's that. But when you're in a leadership position as a senior enlisted leader of any kind, like a LPO, chief, whatever, taking the time to earn their trust is probably, I'll call it the most important thing, because that's what I believe. But okay, maybe you make an argument about something else, but I think it's the most important thing you can do. And I think it's the most important thing you can do because it makes everything possible. Like it makes communication possible. It makes them, like when I'm in a moment where I don't have time to in detail communicate the why and how and everything else, and I tell you, hey, just go do this right now, that you trust, because I've spent time cultivating that trust in that relationship, that I've thought about all the things, I have the big picture in mind, I need you to do this right now without asking any questions. Like that takes trust to get a sailor to do that and to get him to do it the right way without questioning you. Like it's not something I want to make a habit of doing, but there's going to be times, especially when it's emergent, whether that means like a ship's casualty or that just means like, hey, the truck's about to leave. There's going to be times where I need to demand that of them. Say, hey, I need this done right now. Go. And with that, and it might suck. It might be a thing that's really painful. They got to drop what they're doing and go do this thing that I need, and it's going to set them back an hour and whatever. But when you spend time building trust, you're going to have that ability to demand a lot more of your sailors. But spending the time doing that is going to take you humanizing yourself, which I talked about earlier. Like you're going to have to show them enough. And junior sailors are really intuitive and smart, and they can see through your bullshit a lot more than you think they can. Like it's shocking to me how how little faith a lot of chiefs have in junior sailors' ability to see right through their bullshit. And they can also tell when you actually care or you're just playing one on TV. You know, like they know if you genuinely care about them and you genuinely have their best interests at heart and you want to help them with a thing, instead of just checking the box, right? Like you'll see enlisted leaders walk around and like, hey, how's it going? How's your family? Like blah, blah, blah. And you can tell immediately tell the difference between someone who's doing that because they feel like it's what they should be doing and somebody that's doing that because they actually care how your family is. And so it's a real simple step of just actually care and go demonstrate that to your junior sailors. A lot of people get caught up in leadership styles and, well, I'm quiet and reserved and don't show a lot of emotion. That's all right. They can tell. Like I'm telling you right now, like junior sailors will be able to tell. I don't care what your personality type is, your mode of communication, whatever. They'll know if you care or not, right? And they're pretty forgiving as far as like mode of communication and personality type and leadership style. Like, yeah, they might respond better to somebody like me who's got like the loud booming voice and more of a command presence and looks the part and stuff like that. But I've seen guys that like, they're kind of like sloppy, nerdy, like whatever, however you want to say it. They don't look the part. They definitely don't sound the part. And their division or department would walk through hell for them because they actually cared and they demonstrated it not just through words, but through actions, right? So anytime this buddy of mine, and I'll leave his name out of it, but he's a senior chief that I've talked about his situation before, where he's the guy that a senior chief that went to captain's mast. But he went to captain's mast for loving his sailors to a fault, basically. Like he made a mistake in a moment of weakness where he just didn't want his sailors to suffer anymore. So he lied about something he shouldn't have and then immediately admitted it because he has integrity. And then he ended up going to mast for it. But he was the kind of guy that like, he'd give you his shirt off his back if he thought you might need it. Like he was that kind of where you're like, dude, I don't need a shirt. I'm good. But he's like, well, you might need one later. So just take it. That kind of a guy, like just would lay down in traffic for his sailors if he thought it was in their best interest. And they knew it. And he wasn't your typical like vocal leader. He was the kind of guy, he stuttered a lot when he stood in front of a group of people, always looked like he was nervous, soft-spoken guy, like, bald, a little chubby, like he didn't look like the type of like, I don't know, like prototypical go get 'em like type leader that you might think that would just kind of have it all locked down and it would be easy for him, or just the type of leader where when sailors tell stories about that one chief that they actually liked, that it was kind of that type of person. And like this guy, I've never seen it sailors like want to follow someone more. Like it was incredible. And so it doesn't really matter how you go about doing it as long as you're doing it. If you go into the relationship with the desire to like just care and make sure they have everything they need, and you are genuinely invested in their success and progression and making sure that the mission's accomplished, but not at the expense of them. It's like, you know, like, yeah, we have to accomplish a mission. And yes, there's going to be times where it's going to feel like I'm expending more effort than maybe required, or we have to like go really hard and it's going to hurt and it's going to leave a mark even. But it's like, they're going to be willing to do that for you because you're the type of leader that is going to take care of them on the back end, or already took care of them on the front end, or whatever. They just trust that this needs to happen because Chief's saying it needs to happen. It's super possible to do that, to take the time to, and it's a lot simpler. It's not always easy, but it's a lot simpler than people think it is. Because sometimes I kind of talk about this in general terms where I'm like, just get them to trust you. Well, okay, how do I do that? Well, just going into it, being a genuine human being, actually acting on the things that you think should be happening, making sure that they have everything they need. Like something as simple as drink runs. It's a story I've told in the podcast before, where be in the middle of a stores load. And so I demonstrate to them that I'm there with them and that I care about them, where we're the most important place for me to be when we're loading food for a deployment on a submarine is amongst that stores load. And sometimes the most important place for me to be when it's 2300 and we're still not out yet because we're stowing food is to be debloused and stowing food, because the faster I can get this food stowed, the faster I can get them off the submarine. So I do those things, right? But also, like, when we're in the midst of doing it, a lot of the times the way that it happens is we work really, really long days. They give us like this impossible timeline, and they're overworked and like at their wits' end in a lot of scenarios, because then the wind blows, the crane stops moving, it starts raining, just stupid. And you're standing up there with pallets of food, just like wishing you weren't there. I was going to say something else. And, you kind of recognize that moment when the tension starts to peak, and I'd be like, hey guys, I'll be right back. Just keep going or take a break or whatever, depending on where we're at in the stores load. Come back 20 minutes later with everybody's favorite energy drink, maybe some other crap, and start passing them out. And it's just this moment of like, oh, thank God. You know what I mean? Like, it's a tiny thing. But it's this moment of, oh, thank God. And just the gesture, the fact that, one, I didn't have to, I did it without being asked. 3, I actually remembered all their favorite energy drinks. Like, that tiny, tiny moment of relief, I can't even tell you how much like trust and faith it buys from those sailors. Again, not why I did it. I did it because I genuinely care about them and I thought it would cheer them up. But they know that, and by virtue of them knowing that and seeing that and reading that from that action, it's like they take away from that I'm a guy that cares about them and that they can trust. And it's that simple. It's not always the easiest thing in the world for certain people to do it in a way that kind of fits what they're comfortable doing. But it's like, it's pretty simple. And sometimes it's also really easy. Let them go home when you say that you're going to let them go home. A lot of the stuff you see in memes and stuff all over the internet, it's shockingly easy to communicate to junior sailors that you're a person that they can trust, but you have to do it consistently through your behavior. You can't cave into the pressures of, oh, well, the chain of command wants to do this. Well, yeah, sometimes I'm going to have to march out of the mess with a message I don't want. And I'm not going to march out there and say, well, the chain of command sucks, so we have to go do this thing either. They're going to not start doing this thing in 1800. They're going to know by my inability to completely mask the inflection in my voice, like they're going to know. So there's going to be times where that happens as well, but that's going to be another one of those moments where I'm demanding, or that I need to demand of them, and they're just going to answer that call because they know. They're not dumb. So the biggest disconnect for me is trust, but the easiest thing to fix is also trust. It's like, organizationally, I think we got a lot of work to do rehabbing our image, which, I mean, I've gone in excruciating depth on the podcast on this. So if you want to hear about me wax philosophical about the Chiefs mess and the organizational structure and how I think there needs to be institutional change, go check those out. I won't like go revisit all that now, but there's a lot that needs to get fixed so that in the way that we present ourselves and the way that Chiefs are held accountable, in the lack of transparency and artificial division for no reason and stuff like that, that I think would help a ton also. But in like an individual one-on-one relationship that most divisions have with their chief, repairing trust is not that difficult. And even if the organization has the reputation and kind of lack of trust organizationally that it does right now, it's shockingly easy for one individual chief to fix that in that relationship with that one division or department or whatever. Just by being a good person and demonstrating it through action. Like, it might, if you got a division that's really bitter and jaded and had a bad chief for a long time, it might take a little bit longer, but they're going to be able to tell pretty quickly, like, I think this one might be different. And you're going to have to show them through your action to earn that back, but you'll be able to earn that back if you keep doing it. But yeah, that probably was a bit much for the reason why I think is trust. I think communication is just a symptom of the greater problem, but and it all improves when you fix trust.
All right, I think we'd like to end it on this question here.
Yeah,
it seems kind of, I gotta find it, kind of hokey, but I do like it. Where did it go? All right, it's from Grim. It says, if you were McPon for a day, what's the first major policy change you would seek to enact? As in, what do you think deserves immediate attention that the current leadership has not addressed yet?
Interesting. I mean, I feel like I have to say leadership development and education, but honestly, it would. I mean, if it was a day one thing, I don't think I'd have time to invest the. I'm gonna nuke this. I don't know if I'd have time to invest in that giant of a thing, or even the rapid course correction of the Chiefs mess. But I think I'd probably.
If you could make anything happen in a day.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm nuking this. I'm like, what could I get done in a day? Like, what's like?
No, when it's possible to get one.
Yeah, anything's possible. Got it. Yeah, I mean, fix the Chiefs mess, and that's a real general statement that requires a lot of things. But there's just such an obvious need for change, and it affects like everyone all the time. And that's like the way I look at it is like, and I'm ironically, and I'll tell you why in a second, but ironically, I'm wearing a shirt right now. On the back, there's like a spine, and it says "Sailors are the backbone," and it's kind of a poking fun at the idea that Chiefs are the backbone of the Navy, because at best we're the rudder, and then like officers are the helm, But sailors are the ones getting the mission done, and my sole reason for existing is to make sure that they have everything they need and are completely prepared in every conceivable way to get the mission done. And I think if you polled every junior sailor in the Navy or just a large cross section, and asked them that question, like, are we getting that definition done of if you said this was a chief's job, are they getting it done? The vast majority would respond negatively, right? That no, my chief doesn't do anything except make my life harder. Some of that is perceived, but a lot of it's not, right? And then that's lack of leadership development and education and everything else. But I don't think we're doing our job as an organization for the fighting force in the way that we're supposed to. And that would be the thing that if I could snap my fingers, like what's the dude from Marvel? Thanos, there you go. If I could snap my fingers and fix something like that, it would be the Chiefs mess. It would be turning it into the organization that I think in a lot of ways we believe we are in our minds, but we're not really, and it's incredibly obvious and communicated to us. I mean, for fuck's sake, we had an op-ed more than once in the Navy Times about how the Chiefs mess is broken. Like if a junior sailor on active duty has the stones to write an op-ed while they're still on active duty about how broken the Chiefs mess is, there's probably something going on there that needs attention. And I don't know that at the highest levels there's an appetite to do that yet. I mean, I think that there's problem recognition happening in certain ways. I don't think they know how bad it is. I don't think they're taking it seriously enough. I don't think that action is happening the way that it should be. But I also think that recognition of some of the problems is there, and you see little like bright spots here and there. Like one of the examples I've given recently was I shared the MCPON's season guidance on social media recently. It's just like a memo he puts out every year talking about what he expects out of command senior enlisted leaders and chiefs during the chief season. And one of the lines that I liked the best was it talked about how the chief of naval personnel has already selected these people to be chiefs, right? This isn't a screening process. It's a training process. Like it's our responsibility to make sure that they're ready to be chiefs on pitting day. Like we're not deciding whether or not we're going to accept them, which is a traditional viewpoint that you get to the end of the chief season and there's this moment called acceptance. And if you want to learn more about this, there's a Teaching to the Creed episode where I talk all about it. It's a symbolic like self-actualization thing that happens at the end of the final net events where we're kind of deciding if you're ready to be a chief basically. And it's like, we're talking about it through that lens, but it's become this thing where a lot of people believe it to be literal, and it's not at all. It's a moment designed to basically finally flip the switch in the sailor's brain that like, hey, you're a chief now. You're not a junior sailor. And like your responsibilities have increased and you have all these new blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like it's just this moment of self-actualization that, hey, you're part of the Chiefs mess now. We're your family. We're here to support you. We want you to succeed, blah, blah, blah. Some people have taken it to be literal. And there's been, I've stood in a final night moment where a bunch of chiefs were like, no, we're not accepting them. And I'm just like, Like what? Like this isn't real. Like you guys are pretending that the game is real. It's like that's not what we're doing. We're using it as a mechanism to make that the switch flip, right? So it's like it's turned into this weird warped idea of what I think it could be. And that's, I would go all in on fixing the Chiefs mess, which would involve programming and leadership development, education, and all the other things I talk about all the time. But I think it's a thing that would add so much to so many areas. And I mean, stuff I probably couldn't think about if you gave me an hour to list everything. Like if the Chiefs mess all of a sudden became what it like we have an idea of in our mind of what it is, like, or what we think it should be, and by reading like the mission, vision, and guiding principles, like the stuff Chiefs are evaluated on, if we actually lived up to that on a daily basis, I feel like that would markedly improve the lives of every single sailor in the Navy. So that'd be the move.
Well, thank you for answering that and all the other questions.
Yeah, no, hey, I appreciate everybody's time. I know some people have already kind of stepped out, but I appreciate you guys setting this up. Whoever magically made that bot appear,
I know.
I appreciate that as well. Now I got to figure out how to get the recording out of it, but yeah, no, I appreciate you guys doing this, for having me, for sitting there as I went on 5-minute rants. Like, it was awesome. I really enjoyed this.
We appreciated having you here, and we'd love if you came back at any point.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, no, we can definitely do it again. All right. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Again, I had a ton of fun doing it. Really thank you to all the Discord moderators that made it happen, and all the people for coming and hanging out. If you're not familiar with Discord, I put the invite link that you would need to go to the server, and I think you can just search for it too. When you download Discord, it's an app, or you can just do it via a web browser, and on your phone. But yeah, you can. You should go check that out. It's really cool. I had a lot of fun hanging out, and it's always funny to drop in and just see what everybody's talking about and lurk a little bit, and it's good times. It was fun to kind of get pulled into another community, and I always love answering questions, as you know, by the long-winded 2+ hour podcast. So yeah, I'm glad I got to do that. If you need anything from us, as always, hit us up. don'tcovertheshitpodcast@gmail.com. You can Facebook message us, Don't Cover the Shit Podcast, or you can DM us on Instagram or Reddit, or you can find me on Discord, dgutspodcast. Yeah, hit us up. If you got questions, comments, concerns, episode ideas, suggestions, criticisms, whatever. And then I'm finally going to actually, if you stuck around this long, and I kind of owed them the answer because I told them I'd explain the t-shirt. But if you've stuck around this long, I think you deserve to know first. And I'll start talking about it more and putting it on social media and stuff. But there is social media accounts you can follow that I've just kind of started doing. But I in transitioning to retirement soon, which even that's I don't know the exact timeline, but I started to think about what I was going to do when I retired. And in doing that, I always the dream would be to do the podcast and other things for a living. And what will that look like? I don't really know. I don't know what my income will be when I know what my pension will be, but my disability rating is who knows. And then what money, if any, could I make from doing the podcast if I was active on YouTube and I had a Patreon account, and or I did some donation based thing, or potentially had sponsors, which is the kind of the one that makes me a little uneasy because I don't want the podcast to feel like a product. But I've been talking to a lot of smart people about it, and I was trying to figure it out, and an idea that I could do while I'm on active duty, because again, I've said a bunch of times that I don't want to monetize the podcast itself until I'm retired. I came up with this idea of, and try not to cringe, an apparel brand. And so I know it sounds kind of odd, but in a way it doesn't either, because we're very proud people. That was something that the guys over at Test Depth, who, if you haven't heard our podcast yet, go check it out, on the Midwatch podcast, that they said to me was like, hey, we're a proud people, and we want to be able to display that pride as submariners. And I mean, that translates over to every warfare community, Navy as a whole, Chiefs, of course, right? Like, I mean, we're made fun of for how prideful we can be with our stickers and shirts and all that crap. So, but I wanted to do it in a way that was me, you know, that reflected my values and the kind of stuff that I want to wear. I couldn't find anything that I could display my pride and heritage, that had my sense of humor, that was actually my style and size and all that stuff. And then heritage was a big thing too. I wanted that programmed in. So I have endeavored to start doing that. It'll be called Don't Give Up the Ship Apparel. It'll be at dgutspodcast.com. The site has not launched yet, so if you try to go to that URL, it'll be a dead end for now. I plan on launching the site next month in September. And but the social media accounts are live now, so if you want to follow those, it's Don't Go Up the Ship Apparel on Facebook, and at dgutspodcast on Instagram. And so you can find us there. There's some pictures of some product stuff. I'm not super active on there quite yet. I'm still spinning all this up and figuring out how I'm going to balance it all, but I'm really excited about it. You can see some pictures of some of the ideas and stuff that I'm working on Instagram and Facebook. And then, I'm pretty excited to next month launch what's effectively a business side of the house. And it'll also hopefully help fund the podcast platform and all the things that I want to do with this going forward, and especially when I retire. So that's what that shirt reference was, the Sailors Are the Backbone thing that I was talking about towards the end there. And I figured it's about time I put it out. So God bless you if you stuck around this long in this podcast, and go check out those social media accounts, give them a follow, and then that way you'll know exactly when it launches. And I mean, I'll put it out on the DS podcast stuff too when it does launch and mention on the podcast. It's not something I'll spam all over the podcast, but yeah, I'm excited. I think it'll be cool, and I think you will all enjoy it. So I look forward to the response to that. And that's it. Please hit the like button, drop a comment down below on what you thought, and subscribe to the channel. That's what I got for you today. Thank you so much for listening, and don't give up the ship.